hijab. Let me just stop there, restart. Please go ahead.
Let's suppose there is no God. Let's suppose there is no omniscient one, no omnipotent one, no all-knowledgeable one, no all-powerful one, no necessary being. Let's suppose, no problem. What do we have? What are the explanations that we have? That the universe came from nothing. But we know from nothing, nothing comes, because nothing is the absence of something. That the universe is self-generated. But we know that that's a contradiction, because the universe cannot generate itself, exist and not exist at the same time. So what do we know? What do we know? We know there exists a universe. We know I exist. We know you exist. We know Oppenheimer exists. And Faisal exists. And hopefully there's not going to be explosions today. Except of the argument that we've just heard. And I will say that when you know that the dependent existences exist, you have two options. Either you have a chain, a finite chain. A depends on B, or B depends on A, C depends on B. In which case A is the beginning of that chain. We the Muslims call that the necessary being, the independent one, God. Obviously the atheist cannot subscribe to that theory. Let's move away from that one, please. So what do we have left? We have an infinite chain. An infinite chain of dependent things. But an infinite chain of dependent things is an absurd proposition. The reason being, because if this was actualized in the actual world, for example, through an infinite amount of multiverses, then it would imply that the inexhaustible has been exhausted. The unlimited has been limited, which is a contradiction, which is absurd. It would also imply that infinite sets exist within infinite sets, which means that the part is equivalent to the whole, but the part is defined by most mereologists as a portion of the whole, which is an absurdity itself and a contradiction. So let's suppose God doesn't exist. What can you atheists actually present and put on the table? You've got nothing. And the best Mr. Faisal could actually put to the table is to say, naturalism can explain just as well, he says. He's not even trying to say it's better. He's trying for equality. He's got a Nelson Mandela approach to the situation. He does. But so do I, in a different manner. Because in an intellectual way, we will conclude, therefore, that a necessary being through which everything depends upon is independent in and of itself, and everything depends upon is the only way to make sense of dependent things. You see, contingent things cannot exist within necessary things. A contingent thing is possible, can exist or not exist. A necessary thing is not possible, it's impossible not to exist. In other words, contingencies cannot exist within necessities. The existence of dependent things, the existence of this young man here, the handsome one, and Oppenheimer, his forefathers led to a lot of people's non-existence. Not your forefathers, but you know, the other Oppenheimer. Their existence indicates without shadow of a doubt that a necessary being is required. So what kind of necessary being is this? We know I'm different to him, and we know he's different to him, and we know you're different to him. Differentiation indicates possibility and contingency. And wherein there is differences and possibility and contingency, therein there must be an explanation for this. And what is the explanation for this? Islamic theism says, an external sorting agent, which specified and particularized things to be a certain manner, which indicates a choice had to be made. And this, we would say, indicates a chooser, a willer, which we would say is the will of God. So already we've identified that you have to have something which is independent and necessary, post-eternal and pre-eternal, to break away from the infinities and have a will. What do we call that? We call that God. Yes, we do. And it's the only explanation that doesn't lead to contradiction and absurdity. I challenge anybody here today to give me another explanation that doesn't lead to contradiction and absurdity. You see, I finished quite early. I've got more to say. I've got more to say, which is, okay, you say, fine, I understand the situation. I agree with you, no problem. But why do you say that Islam is true? Before we get there, one more prerequisite must be made. How could there be only one of these? How come there's not three? For example, the triune situation. Because if there was an individuating factor that individuated and differentiated necessary being A from necessary being B, that would render either or both of them contingent. Because a contingent thing is differentiated in reality. And a necessary being cannot be differentiated from something else. But I'll give you an easier argument, which is the Quranic argument. مَا اتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ مِنْ وَلَدٍ وَمَا كَانَ مَعَهُ مِنْ إِلَهٍ إِذًا لَذَهَبَ كُلُّ إِلَهٍ بِمَا خَلَقَ وَلَعَلَ بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. Chapter 23, verse 91, that there couldn't be more than one God effectively, because they would outstrip one another in power. There cannot be more than one overall power, because an all-powerful agent by definition, yes, means that he has power over all other things. Nothing can supervene on his power capabilities. Moreover, there cannot be more than one overall will. لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا. In chapter 21, verse number 22. If there was in them, i.e. the heavens and the earth, more than one, the heavens and the earth would have been corrupt. Meaning what? You have to have one overriding will. Because if it had been more than one will, it wouldn't be consistent. You couldn't explain the uniformity, the regularity, the stability of the universe. Because there is uniformity, stability, and regularity. Without it, you couldn't even do science. And there is uniformity, stability, and regularity to the extent which it allows life to exist on the universe. That's a fact no one here will deny. There is life on the universe, and that the universe is uniform and regular and stable enough to allow such life to exist. What is the best explanation for this? One singular overarching will that doesn't lead to conflict. So that's why it's one God. But what about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Now there's many things I can say, and in 7 minutes I'll just mention one evidence. There are necessary and sufficient conditions for a word of God to be conceived as such, the word of God. I would put to the table today that one of the necessary conditions is that this cannot contain any contradictions. We are logicians here, we all... The Quran says if this was from other than God, it would have been many contradictions inside of it. لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. The Quran, this is one of the necessary conditions. It's one of the only books to even posit this challenge. Religious books. Which is find the contradiction within it. Secondly, it's inimitable. Thirdly, it's preserved. We will argue all these points. However, what's the sufficient condition? I give you one argument and one argument only. Which is the prophecies of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now I am claiming here, and I'm willing to be challenged today, that the prophecies of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam are the most accurate and numerous and frequent that come from an integrous source and unambiguous in human history. These five criterion that I've just mentioned, if you apply them to any other historical figure, it will collapse. For example, if you look at the Bible, Mark chapter number 13, you'll find that it says in one generation the heavens and the earth will be destroyed. Nostradamus made a prediction that in 177 years there will be famine and war and so on. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he made the following predictions. For example, I'll give you some. That the barefooted Arabs يَتَطَاوَلُونَ فِي الْبُنْيَانِ, that they will compete to see who creates the highest buildings. Now, we're seeing that the highest building in the world is in Burj Khalifa. How could the economic capabilities of these nations be such that if someone wanted to argue this was a self-fulfilling prophecy, that it was such? It couldn't be. Number two, that the Prophet ﷺ predicted the fall, the downfall of the Persian and the Roman Empire, the two greatest empires of that time, spanning millennia. Not only that the Muslims would overtake those empires. Number three, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ predicted the invasions of the Mongols. And I'm ready to give all the primary sources. This is very well known in the Islamic tradition. He told us how the Mongols would invade. And one of the biggest battles in Muslim history was Ain Jalut in 1260. The sacking of Baghdad was in 1258. And this is all connected to the prophecies of the Prophet. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us what kind of world we'll be living in. He said, the world in the future will be such that there will be so much interest. مَنْ لَمْ يَأْكُلْهُ أَصَابَتْهُ مِنْ غُبَارٍ. Whoever doesn't consume the interest, he will be affected by its dust. We're living in an economic system, the whole thing is interest, women busters, perpetuated or exacerbated at least by the interest systems of the banks. And I think South Africa is no different. Number five, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us that there will be an advent of sexually transmitted diseases due to an increased fornication. Number six, the Prophet ﷺ told us that women will go into the workforce. Yes, I'm not sure if any of you have heard this one. حَتَّى تَعِينَ الْمَرْأَةُ زَوْجَهَا فِي التِّجَارَةِ. This is a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. The woman will involve herself in business with her husband. This is a prophetic hadith. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ even told us about obesity that will become a phenomenon within his ummah. And many people in this room, I'm only kidding, says, you see what I mean? The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us exactly where Islam is going to spread. زُوِيَ لِيَ الْأَرْضِ, he said, فَرَأَيْتُ مَشْرِقَهَا وَمَغَرِبَهَا وَإِنَّ أُمَّتِي سَيَبْلُغُ مُلْكُهَا مَا زُوِيَ لِي مِنْهَا. That the earth has been projected to me and I saw its eastern parts and western parts, and all of the ummah will take what has been projected. Why does he say east and west and not north and south? Look at the map. He told us exactly where Islam will spread. He said it will go to Sindh al-Hind. It will go to India and Pakistan. He told us it will go to Egypt. He told us it will go to Asham, Jordan and Lebanon and these countries. Yemen. How could somebody get this so right? There's been no figure in human history who has predicted with such frequency and unambiguity the events of the future as Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And these are just some examples. I could go on for 2 hours. And books have been written. Volumes, voluminous books have been written. Encyclopedic, compendious, voluminous books have been written on the issue. I'm not going to talk about that today. I've just given you as much as you need. Now to respond to my interlocutor quickly. He's talking about the problem of evil. He had 2 arguments effectively. One of them was disagreement, religious disagreement. Effectively, and I don't want to straw man and make it correct, saying the existence of religious disagreement means there's no God. What the hell is this? Sorry to say. وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ لَجَعَلَ النَّاسَ أُمَّةً وَاحِدًا. Quran says, if Allah wanted, He could have made the people one people. وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلَفِينَ. And they are in fact continually disagreeing. وَلِذَلِكَ إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ رَبُّكَ. Except for who Allah has rahmah on. وَلِذَلِكَ خَلَقَهُمْ. And that's the reason why He created them in the first place. He created you as a test, my friend, to see of you which is going to be good and bad. وَلِذَلِكَ خَلَقَهُمْ. This is no argument against us. This is actually in line with God's wisdom and mercy. And He says evil, the problem of evil, which we've heard 1,000 times before. I disbelieve in evil. How about that? I believe evil is privation. I don't believe evil is substratum. Put evil under a microscope. Atheists, tell me where evil is. Evil is privation, is the lacking of God's goodness. That's what I say evil is. Tell me where evil is. Let me use empirical value judgment to show where the substance of evil is. Evil doesn't exist. How about that? As an atheist, you don't believe in God, but you believe in evil. But you can't put evil under a microscope empirically. What ontological status does evil have? How can you use the existence of non-existence to try and disprove the existence of the necessary existence? It's a waste of time. And we've got 20 seconds here. And in that time, I will just recite Quran. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, which is, say He's Allah, one and only, Allahu Samad. The one who everyone depends upon, he depends upon nothing. لم يلد ولم يولد. He begets not, nor is he begotten. ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. There's nothing like it. جزاكم الله خير.